Lesley, how are you today?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
And anybody who's watching on video will be impressed that we have color coordinated. You're missing out if you're on the podcast. We are actually wearing exactly the same color green. We didn't send each other a memo. We just happened, it's obviously the in color, right? We're so fashionable, right?
It's the color of communication.
Do you know, I didn't know that. I did not know that. Talk to me about that before we go in further.
I think if you sort of think about, if you believe in the whole sort of how the chakras work, and sort of different colors for different parts of the body, green is often billed as the color of communication, whereas purple is often billed as the color of royalty. So I often sort of try and wear different colors depending on how I'm feeling. So I have a purple jacket if I'm on stage. I have a green jacket if I'm on stage. I also have black in case I feel like fading into the background. So it's nice to sort of mix it up and have different colors.
That's really interesting. Well, anyway, so we've chosen green. We are going to be talking about communication. But before we start, I think it'd be interesting for our listeners to know that actually you have a full-time job as well as speaking. So tell me, how do you balance the two? And does that ever cause you conflicts? Do tell us about your full-time job as well, if as much as you can tell us.
So yes, you're quite right. I have two jobs, if you want to call them both jobs. So I'm a full-time civil servant. I work in the Ministry of Defence as the Chief Communications Officer in the campaign team. Actually, no, I have three jobs because I'm also a reservist in the Royal Air Force. So when you add speaker onto that, that's my third job effectively. So what I've tried to do is holistically combine them. So most of the speaking that I do, whether it's such as your good self on a podcast, moderating on a panel, or sort of actually giving a keynote speech, it's usually about subject matter in which I work. So as a communications officer. So what I do is I get clearance, depending on the level of the speech that I'm giving, I get clearance from my chain of command, from my bosses at work, to make sure that the brand is a good fit. So for example, if I'm asked by, say, a charity or a company to come and spend a couple of hours of just chatting to them and helping them with their communication ideas, I will run it past my bosses to make sure that it's a good brand fit. I haven't had any conflict so far, but then I haven't ever been asked to speak internationally yet. So I'm kind of hoping that the bosses will be sure you can go to Italy or America for a few days. I'm hoping that problem comes up in the future. But it is very much, it's all holistic. It all fits in the field in which I'm an expert and that I wish to communicate in. So it's just that kind of brand alliance of the company that I'm speaking with or for.
Well, it's good to know that I've been approved, that you were allowed to come and speak on my podcast. It's not the first time I've been approved. We'll have to talk about this separately at some point, I think. But my man works in security in government, and he had to have me checked out before we could get married. Would you believe? I did not know this before he could even
He had to
ask.
be put on his security clearance. Yes, that's a problem. You have to have your anybody that you live with, anybody that you marry or you cohabit with, goes on your security clearance. So there's probably a file on you somewhere, Maria.
Yeah, I know. I was quite shocked actually to find that out because he did all this without my permission. Actually, anyway, that's another subject, right? We're going off piece. What I liked about what you said holistically combine, and that's so important because many speakers that I work with, we're trying to find that thread that goes through everything, so that then when you're speaking, it's actually all your experience is relevant. And that's so important because all your experience and expertise actually comes under that one topic that you talk about, and you can relate it all. And that's much easier for you, isn't it, then, as well, in terms of preparing and knowing what you're focusing on.
I think it is and it isn't. I was actually quite surprised. So when I first started, I kind of thought, okay, I'll have one or two keynote speeches that I'll be able to sort of adapt depending on what the audience and the client wants. But actually, what I found is that when people have delved into my background and we've sort of chatted and met people on LinkedIn, they've asked me to speak about things that I've had no content prepared on. It's like, oh, okay. So, can you speak about mental health in the military? Yes, I can. I'll just go and do a bit more research so that I can be more knowledgeable about that area. Can you talk about what it's like to be a woman in the armed forces? Yes, I can. I've got a uniform in the cupboard I can put on. Can you talk about what it's like to go through menopause? That's a really personal story, but if that's what you want to hear today, then I'll adapt something. So although I started off with a real core golden thread, and I think it just becomes stronger, it's now got little branches coming off of it. So it's become more like a tree.
So maybe that golden thread is a different golden thread than the one originally there. So that's interesting, because I think there's always got to be that sort of overriding umbrella so that people know where to fit you. Otherwise, they don't know where you sit. Let's not talk about menopause either. Let's leave that one. We'll park. There's a couple of topics we're going to park here. But something you stress is that it's important to start with your own story. Tell me what you mean by this.
So I have been a delegate at many conferences. In my career, I've listened to many media interviews. I've watched many people on stage. And I think when people go straight in to try and effectively sell a corporate story, particularly communication officers in big brands, but they haven't thought about who they are, what their personal story is first, I think it fails to land. So my kind of golden thread is all about helping people emotionally engage their audiences. So the story has to land. So the idea is that if you aren't ready as your own story, your own package, you can't then sell another story on top of that lack of story, if that makes sense.
I like that. That really does make sense. And I get that, because when I was booking speakers, I needed that narrative. I don't want to know why you do it unless it's really relevant to the person that's booking you, that they have to know. But I do need to understand the story, who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and the so what. I need to understand that piece so it fits. And in a way, that story is also part of your credibility, isn't it, really?
It is. I think, why should people listen to you? Why should they spend time with you? It's all very well saying, yeah, I'm a military communication officer. But when I add that layer on that I've done 15 years, bounced around the world in many different conflicts and military exercises, worked with almost pretty much every international partner we have, seen some very bad things, seen some very good things, and I learned a lot of communication lessons along the way. And then I hit you with, and I'm here today to share some of those with you to help you in your communications. I'm hoping that's when you've got their attention.
Absolutely, definitely got my attention. So anyway, Lesley, tell me about, so something you talk about amongst the other topics too is bulletproof storytelling. So, I mean, that's a fantastic title. Tell us a bit more about that.
So this is a concept that I came up with about 12 years ago. If I can tell you a very short story, I was once upon a time caught in a burning toilet tent in Afghanistan with ITV's Julie Etchingham. I'd gone out to make a documentary with ITV on women on the front line. And we were sort of just going around Afghanistan, chatting to women in uniform. I'd set up all of this amazing program. It was all carefully organized. It was all carefully curated. I had the women coming in clean uniform to be interviewed on TV, and it was all getting a bit too pristine, a bit too kind of choreographed and curated. And I was convinced it was going to work, but I wasn't sure it would make great telly, as in it's not particularly emotionally engaging. And the final couple of days of filming, we noticed there was a very large burn pit at the back of the camp that we were on. I went to investigate because we thought they might make some nice pictures, and we actually found ourselves caught in the middle of a raging fuel fire. So I did my best to protect ITV by hiding them in a toilet tent, and I actually realised we were on Camp Leatherneck at this point, the US Marine Corps base. We'd stumbled across into their base. And so I put them into this tent, closed it all up, turned around and realised there's some poor chap reading like Stars and Stripes sat on the toilet, literally. And this giant ITV crew with these massive cameras and this British officer burst in on him. So I hid them in the tent and I thought, this is great, I'm going to protect them. Maybe we won't tell this part of the story on the TV documentary. Short story, the tent started burning down, so I had to get them out really, really quickly. And then by the time we'd evacuated out and we'd got there and we'd sat down the next morning to review the footage, and we were absolutely filthy. My hair was over the shop, I was black, my uniform was absolutely filthy. We reviewed the footage and realized that actually the documentary we'd spent the last 10 days making wasn't going to work. And we had more than enough in that one night of adventure to make a really emotionally engaging piece. And so I realized that all my carefully laid plans weren't going to work. I had too much choreography, too much curation, too much careful planning wasn't what the audience wanted. They wanted something that was real, authentic, and emotionally engaging. So I kind of thought, actually, if I could apply these concepts to all of my communications and bulletproof the story so they were definitely going to land, as in you protect those stories from any kind of disintegration. And by the time they land with their audience, it's as you wanted, you achieve the effect you wanted. Then how powerful would that be? And I've spent the last sort of 10 years then applying that concept to all of the work that we do in the Ministry of Defence.
Fantastic. That's amazing. So it's sort of like, you don't need all that peripheral story. You want the crux, the most important piece. And I suppose the lesson from that story is, for that poor chap, is always take a fire extinguisher into the toilet with you. Yeah, what do you reckon?
I mean, to be fair to him, the fire was actually quite far away, but it was a dust storm that blew it across the road. And it was only after the tent started getting really hot and the smoke started coming in that I think he finished up, put his paper down and ran away.
I hope he pulled his trousers up. Anyway, goodness gracious, I didn't realize we'd be talking about toilets too. We've covered a multitude of topics. Wow. Anyway, I now want to talk to you about Tom Cruise. So you actually have done some work with film companies, but the story I want to hear about is when you met Tom and something about climbing a tree. What's that about?
So I am the girl that climbed a tree for Tom Cruise, which kind of shows you my levels of dedication. I've been very lucky in my role that we get to work on documentaries, TV series, and feature films. So this was several years ago, one of the Mission Impossible films, Rogue Nation. I don't know if anybody remembers the film, but in the opening sequences, Tom is hanging off the side of an aircraft, quite literally, trying to climb into get into the passenger space. It's actually a Royal Air Force aircraft, and it was actually filmed on a Royal Air Force base. They spent a week with us filming, and he went up and down on this little harness on this giant aircraft. I think it was about 7 times up to 1,000 feet, just a harness on. No green screen. This guy's doing all of his own stunts. So we're back to being bulletproof, authentic, raw, getting in there, getting it emotionally engaging. And what's happening is obviously Mission Impossible, top secret, quite literally. They don't want any media coverage till the film comes out. And in the some of the tabloids the next day, there were these really grainy photos of what looked like Tom Cruise running across the top of an aircraft. And of course, we knew they were right because we'd been there on the film set. So what I did was I went round the back of the base and I looked at where all of these possible camera angles could be. So I had my copy of the newspaper outside the base. And I realized this chap had been climbing trees because we put up barriers all around the fence and you couldn't see, a bit like when you get at festivals, so you can't see into the VIP area. And so this guy had been climbing trees. So I climbed the trees to work out which angle he'd got from with a big camera lens, told the Royal Air Force Police, and they put up new barriers and things. Well, we didn't cut the tree down, but they put down bits and pieces for it. And so I thought, that's pretty cool. I can keep that as a story. And when filming wrapped, and Tom asked to meet members of the military that had helped the filming go on, I pushed forward all of the air crew, all of the guys on the ground that had done it. And his assistant said, no, you need to meet Lesley. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to meet Tom Cruise. It's like Maverick. And, he gestured forward and I went to put my hand out and he was like, and I got the Tom Cruise hug. I don't think I watched for a week, man. But I got the Tom Cruise hug. And I think he really appreciated that I'd gone above and beyond to try and protect the story. The key lesson in bulletproofing, protect the story until it's ready to land. So yeah.
Oh. Love that. Love that. And also you've got the plane, the land. So that's quite good. I like that. So protect the story until it's ready to land. Absolutely true. The story needs to be ready. I really like that. I really like that. So you've done a lot of media training, haven't you, in your career, and you've trained people, I imagine, as well. So speakers often get the opportunity to get interviewed either on a podcast, or maybe they might do a radio interview, maybe they might do something for press, etc. What advice would you give speakers with regards to those interview situations?
So I've watched a lot of speakers. I did quite a lot of study and preparation before I became a speaker myself. And, when they're on stage, they're absolutely fantastic. They've had the brief from the client, they're face to face with the audience. They can see how their work is landing or not landing. They can adapt it as necessary. And I think, and they are in command and control. They have the microphone, they have the clicker for the slides. They are masters of their own destiny. When I've seen them be interviewed by media, whether that's been TV, print or radio, it's almost as if some of them lose a little bit of the magic, which is a real shame. Because when you think about it, when you're being media interviewed, it's a completely different skill set. And I think, if you're not aware of the fact that you can't see the audience, you don't know what the journalist's intent is, you don't know what the story spin is going to be, but they almost kind of forget to get across their key messages, their core vision. When they're on stage and they've got their key points and they've got their slides and they've got their book they're talking about, they're absolutely on message. When they get interviewed, it's like they forget. And I think that's a real shame. And I would encourage people to sort of think in the mindset of, what are the key messages from my talk? And if I can't see my audience now, because you can't see the other side of the media interview, what is the 1 or 2, possibly 3 maximum things that I would wish to get across?
Fantastic. Brilliant. So if you were being interviewed, what would be your 2 or 3 that you would want to get across?
And it's all about shaping your story And when it's ready to land, make sure it emotionally engages your audiences, and make sure you have started with yourself. Own your own story before you look to tell the stories of others.
Brilliant. What a fantastic way to wrap up. I put you on the spot there, but you were brilliant. You didn't flinch. You've done this before. You knew what you're doing.
The military training.
Military training, yeah. Not even a bit of sweat. Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you so much for the lovely stories. I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's been great to chat.
Wonderful. And thank you everybody for listening to Speaking Business Podcast. I hope you also enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please remember to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, tell your friends and share it. And until next time, I have been Maria Franzoni. Bye-bye for now.